I'll be honest, what's the point? It's just a token gesture. If you wanted to get a good result, you couldn't hold back. You had to give it your all for 17 laps. Now what would I change? Well, first of all, I'd flip the grid. Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Joe Tyrrell and welcome back to GP Blog. As I'm recording this, Max Verstappen has just won Formula 1's first ever sprint race. 17 laps and 30 minutes of flat out racing eventually saw the Dutchman win after overtaking Lewis Hamilton off the line. It was certainly different, but was the sprint race a success? I'm going to look at a few of the pros and cons from our first ever F1 sprint and look at what could be changed for the future. But before we get into the video, over the last 28 days, 98% of you haven't subscribed. So if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button down below and turn on notifications. It really does help us. Let's get into it. We'll get to the negatives first and we'll get them out the way. With any changes to F1, it's going to have some teething issues and criticism was inevitable. My biggest gripe with it was that for 3 laps it was all action. After that, I felt it fell flat. The eventual race winner Verstappen got in front early on and never looked in danger after lap 4 or 5. Now that could have been Hamilton in that situation, and I think the outcome would have been the same. Hamilton would have driven comfortably to the win. It just felt like it was an extra 17 laps. It was missing some variation, but I'll come on to what I would change later. The likes of Sebastian Vettel and Nico Rosberg have already made this point and I'm about to join them. The winner of the sprint race should not be awarded pole position. The pole position award should be reserved for the fastest driver around a single lap. In a race, there are so many other factors that can affect the results. Hamilton could have had a tyre blowout, Verstappen could have had an engine failure, and it would have cost them pole position, and it wouldn't be representative of the fastest man across a single lap. First, second and third got 3, 2 and 1 points respectively, but I'll be honest, what's the point? It's just a token gesture. If you're going to give out points, give them to the top 8 or 10, or don't bother at all. And finally for cons, I've already mentioned it, but I felt like it needed something extra. It needed a bit of spice, a little bit of flair. It just felt like an extra 17 laps for the sake of 17 more laps. It was just a race before the bigger race tomorrow. It needs more incentive. Now I may have sounded pretty down about all that, but there were plenty of pros and I actually did really enjoy it. It was flat out racing for 17 laps. And I know I've said it got a bit samey after 4 or 5, but it was as fast as the drivers could go for pretty much half an hour. Not many complicated strategies, no pit stops, just pure speed, and that made it interesting. And for newcomers to the sport, that will probably make it a lot easier to follow, because it was just racing. Formula 1 can find a way to make the racing better. I think it has serious potential. It also felt like it had real jeopardy to it, and Sergio Perez's crash was a great example of that. If you wanted to get a good result, you couldn't hold back. You had to give it your all for 17 laps. Perez was trying to fight his way into a better position, but he got in trouble and it cost him massively. He now starts miles down the grid and faces to challenge to even score points. This will only benefit from a few tweaks because it will be flat out racing with jeopardy, which is entertaining, not flat out racing with jeopardy where it's lacking an X factor. And finally, it made the weekend worth it. Each day had value. Friday can often get forgotten about because it's just full of boring testing. By putting qualifying on Friday, it gave it a purpose and extended the weekend. As a result, it meant the teams had less time testing and they had to get things right quick. It made it far more unpredictable. And you know I love unpredictability. Now what would I change? Well, first of all, I'd flip the grid. Keep quali on Friday, that can decide Sunday's lineup, but reverse the top 10, or even all 20 for the sprint race. Let's see other drivers mixing it up in the points. However, that is if you keep the point system. Personally, I would, but give 1 to 10 to the top 10 finishers. Otherwise, they just have no meaning. And lastly, I've already said this in a previous video, but put a sprint race midweek under the floodlights. It would be so cool in my opinion. Well, that's our evaluation of the sprint race, but what about you? What do you think? Put your opinions in the comments below, but enjoy the British Grand Prix, and I'll catch you next time.